Welcome to Our Voices, Our Stories, preserving the history of gay men in Western North Carolina. I am delighted to have a special guest with me today, and his name is Andrew. We'll call him Bear. And welcome. I appreciate you being here.
Well, it's a blessing to be here. I'm very happy to. Good
Good.
people, good company.
We talked a little bit a couple weeks ago in preparation for this, and you were telling me about how you got the name Bear. And so I wanted you to start out and just tell us, how'd you get the name Bear?
Well, when I lived in Atlanta, I worked for the Georgia Tech Police Department, and I was 6'1", I weighed 190, and worked out, so I was in good shape. And I worked off-duty security for Bulldogs,
Okay.
which was on Peachtree Street.
And Bulldogs is a gay bar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Jerry Pisca owned it, God rest him. And Jerry, in fact, hired me because I was openly gay, even though my chief didn't know it. And these two guys started getting into a fight. So I walk over and I grab one of the bear hug, and he's kicking and screaming, but I carried him outside and set him down on the floor or on the pavement, told him to behave himself. And this queen said, "Oh, you hug like an old bear." And then it stuck, and I was Bear. I've been Bear ever since. But as I was telling Scotty, I wouldn't carry my service revolver. I'd wear my uniform, and I had my baton, I had my handcuffs, but I would never carry my gun with me.
How come?
Well, an APD officer in Atlanta Police Department, who's my backup, asked me that. And I said, I'm in a bar of 200 plus drunk people. If somebody grabs my weapon, there could be potentially 6 dead people.
Yeah.
So if I can't get done with my presence, then I'll call you and you can come in and do it. But one time I was sitting there and this guy comes in. I knew immediately he was Cherokee. I said, which tribe? I said, you're Eastern Band or Western Band? He said, I'm Western Band. I said, well, I know a number of people in the Eastern Band. He said, well, I just got out of federal pen. And I said, Chief, this is the last place you need to be if you just got out of federal pen. Well, sure enough, he didn't behave himself very long, and I saw a hawk blade knife in his back pocket.
Uh-oh.
So the bartender had come over to me, and he said, Barry, you got to take care of this guy. He's run out of money. He's trying to pass weed for beer. I can't do that. And I thought, what am I going to do with him with a hawk blade knife? I thought, So I went and I said, Chief, come here a minute. And he got up and I said, I've just been told there are 2 narcs in the bar. And if they see you in here and you got weed on you, you're going back to the pen tonight.
Oh.
Well, he shook my hand and said, thank you. And he walked out, and when he did, I kicked the door and locked it so he didn't come back in. And somebody said, did he have a hot blade knife? I said, yeah, and I didn't intend to be, my blood spilled everywhere, so I got him out by lying to him. But there were some interesting people that would come in that bar.
I'm sure. It's an interesting bar from what I remember in my time there.
Oh, yeah, there was a guy that was there one day, and he was leaving, and it was like 4 hours later he comes back, he's white as a sheet of cotton. And he had gone down 14th Street, I guess, and this lady had asked him to help her. It was a young girl. And he was going to give her a lift, and she got in the car and yelled rape.
Oh.
And he had to spend hours in the Atlanta Police Department.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
Lord. So how did you end up in Atlanta?
Well, when I went to Western Carolina at Cullowhee, I met my first gay lover, and it was Larry Wheeler. And Larry and I were both They Desire brothers. And I'm being the incurable romanticist that I am. Larry wanted to go to Atlanta. He tried to get me to stay and finish my degree, but I wouldn't. I wanted to go with Larry. So that's how I ended up in Atlanta with Larry. And he got his car stolen by this gay guy. We ended up having to go to Detroit to find his car. And he had a green Chevrolet. When we get to Detroit, it's silver.
Oh, no.
It's also in one of the worst sections of Detroit. So we get to the airport, and this big Amazonian cab driver, God, I wouldn't want her on my side. She could have taken down a regiment. And she's flying 90 miles an hour down the road, and she said, why you guys want to go to this place? That's full of, I can't say the word, inns and all that. I said, because that's where our car is at the precinct. So we go there, and we check in, and the sergeant says, you have to go with this tow truck to get the car.
Okay.
So we're riding in the tow truck, and his glove compartment flies open, and there's little tiny sticks of dynamite.
Oh!
And I said, what are you doing with these? He said, well, when I get surrounded by these ends, I just throw them out the window. And I said, and they call us racist? So we had to take the car, which had been pretty well, cannibalized. Finally got it where it could ride and drive, and we drove out of Detroit all the way back to Atlanta.
Wow.
And the funniest thing was we run out of money. We stopped at a place called Shit Creek, Tennessee. I'm not lying, that's the name of it, Shit Creek, Tennessee. Because the first time I'd ever seen a church called Shit Creek Baptist Church, but there it was. There's no, they just don't have any creativity.
You can't make that stuff up.
No, you can't. Well, we stopped at this place and we walked in, and I said, ma'am. And this lady said, praise God, there's somebody finally talks like we do. And she fed us breakfast.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Nice.
I said, well, I can talk it even better if you want me to for dinner. But we made it back. We just barely did. We made it back to Atlanta.
Now, how long did you stay in Atlanta?
Close to 12 years, I guess. And we'd been there before because Larry wanted to go down like during semester break. In fact, we met this boy from England, and my being English and American, I immediately was attracted to him. And for some reason, DeKalb County Police stopped us. And they asked him, said, what is your name? And he said, my name is Stephen Bird. This guy said, what? He said, Stephen Bird. I don't know what the hell you're saying, son. I said, Stephen Bird. B-I-R-D, Bird. I said, he's from Britain. Don't you understand anything? We thought we was going to jail, but luckily we didn't. But we found this apartment when we moved, and there was a DeKalb County the detective there.
Uh-huh.
And the reason I liked it is because it had a free bar, so you could drink all the beer you wanted to. And one day we're all sitting around having a number of beers, and this DeKalb detective said, I believe I could take you down if I had to. I said, you got a fight on your hands if you try. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll bet you beer for a month I can take you down and throw you in that swimming pool.
Wow.
I said, you're not taking me down. I beat him.
Oh,
I
good
put
for you.
his butt on the edge of the pool. And he said, by God, I've never seen anybody that strong. I said, I'm afraid of water. I can't swim. When I was 6 years old, my daddy took me to the city the city pool,
Uh-huh.
and left me there. And it was supposed to be in a Red Cross course in swimming. Well, they threw me in, and I went down to the bottom, and I was seeing air bubbles go up, and I saw people's feet,
Right.
Next thing I know, they're pumping me. So I get my little towel and take my little white butt and go home. I said, and I never went back. My father tried his best to get me to go. I never did. I never learned to swim.
There's a lot of people that don't learn to swim.
Yeah, I wish I had.
Well, there's a lot of people that should too.
Yeah.
So let's encourage them.
We'll have to do that. We might could start a nonprofit for that.
Just for people that
Just
can't
for that
swim.
part, yeah.
So I remember us talking to in Atlanta, and you were working, was it Georgia State that you were working for?
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And you were doing security for them.
Yes, there was a division that I was in. We had to maintain, quote, the integrity of the research area.
Okay.
And we were actually Keystone cops, but we were cops. And there were Russian FBI, there were KGB agents in Atlanta. And how I know that was I was at a bar one night, Texas Drilling Company. And this guy comes up and offers me a beer and gets to talking. He said, somebody told me you're with the Georgia Tech Police. I said, yes, I am. And I understand you aren't on campus. I said, no, I'm assigned to wherever I'm assigned. I knew something was up. So the next day, my sergeant, my unit commander, called me in. He said, the FBI and the CIA agent here want to talk to you in military police, military intelligence. I said, isn't that a contradiction? But they said, you passed the test. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the guy sitting beside you on your right was an FBI agent. He recorded everything you said. The guy on your left was KBG, and he was
Oh,
trying to compromise you, and you passed the test.
wow.
But that didn't work because eventually there was this silly, pompous queen at Bulldogs one night. And I told him, I said, do not get in your car and turn on the ignition, because if you do, I'm going to arrest you for a DUI. I'm trying to keep you from getting arrested. So he told me to do what was generally considered anatomically impossible and got in his car anyway.
Yep.
I said, okay, you're under arrest. And he said, I know Chief so-and-so. I said, I don't give a damn if you know the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, your butt's going to jail. 1 week later, the chief calls me in, and he said, you never told anyone that you're gay. I said, no one ever asked. He said, well, you are considered a security threat. I said, how can I be a security threat if I'm open about being gay? So I go to my unit commander and I tell him, and this is exactly what he said. Now, these are offensive terms, folks, but this is what he said. He said, you tell Dr. Hope, who was the EOC officer, you tell him you're not the typical run-of-the-mill queer. I said, Sarge, I know you mean well. You're just a North Georgia redneck, but I know your heart's in the right place. So I go in to see Dr. Franklin, and he was African-American. His daughter was the first female African-American cadet at West Point.
Oh, cool.
So he tells me to come and sit down, and I said, Dr. Franklin, I have something to tell you. I said, my unit commander told me to tell you that I'm not the typical run-of-the-mill queer, and I presume that means you're not the typical run-of-the-mill nigger.
Oh.
And he just cracked up because he knew what I was saying, playing with these stereotypes.
Right.
And he knew it. And at the end of it, he said, son, you're just too damn intelligent to be a cop. And he said, there's nothing I can do because there's no law prohibiting this. And so they let me go. But my favorite thing I did on campus, I have to tell you, Georgia Tech has a nuclear reactor on campus. A lot of people in Atlanta don't know that. And it can overheat, as they say. That's not the proper term, but
Right.
and there's a sign at least half the size of this room that says absolutely no parking, because it's got that area had to be kept open, so if it did begin to overreact, that you could get people in there. Well, I'm driving on from campus back to the research center, which is in North Atlanta, and there sits a car. So I put on my blue light, pull in, secretary to the president. And I said, can you not read that sign? She said, I'm not parked, I'm waiting. What's the difference? I said, $75. And I gave her a citation. She said, I'm the president's secretary. I'll have it turned. I said, I don't care who you are, you're getting a $75 citation. And they had to pay it.
So Bear, there's been several stories you've told me over the time about Atlanta and everything, and there's one about the Bibles that I found very interesting. I'd love for you to share that with us.
Well, at that time, the First Baptist Church was pastored by this right-wing lunatic. The Baptists seemed to have an absolute slew of those, but anyway, he was one of the worst. And he organized what he called prayer warriors. And it would be 4, 5, 6 people, and it usually was one adult and then young men and women. And they all had their gold leaf, red letter, King James Bibles.
Okay.
And they'd wait till you came out of the bar, and then they'd surround you. And they'd start, shaking their Bibles at you. And so they got me one day. And they were going on, and finally the leader said to me, you are the biggest whore in Atlanta. I said, I am the best whore in Atlanta. And that was the end of that. I mean, what some of those, the Baptists especially, was, it's like when they had the first Pride March and gathering at Pritchard Park, 30 years ago, I guess. And there were some Pentecostal preachers. And there's a picture of them in the Asheville Citizen-Time. They're literally foaming at the mouth, laying down on the concrete, And one of them used to freak at O. Henry's all the time. We actually saw Franklin Graham, and if it wasn't Franklin Graham, it was somebody who sure looked like him, Henry's. And I doubt if he was in there to witness to Jesus. But it reminds me of this happened in Dublin at a very famous or infamous gay bath. There was a old priest in there that had a heart attack in the bath. And the way the diocese spun it was, he was there to minister to the gay community, and then happened to mention there were two other priests in there who gave him the last rites. Well, we all know what they were in there for. But yeah, they would do that. There was, it was, and that was the beginning of the political involvement too of the gay community with the city of Asheville. And you begin to have these, and that's when you begin to see the separation in the communities.
Wow.
And this is before the acronym LGBTQ. This was gay, lesbian. Then it argued it had to be gay, lesbian, and bi. And in the early days, I can remember this, the Advocate was not the glossy kind of magazine. It was an underground newspaper.
Right.
And there in the wanted sections, there would be things that said no fat or films. There was no such thing as trans. And that began to change too, because then the political correctness began to come in and, that sort of thing. And it's funny, when I was 18, I joined the Mattachine Society, or Mattachine. I always said Mattachine. The Mattachine Society was, at that time, one of the first gay support groups in the United States. This is 1965. And you had to be 18 to join. And I found it in an underground newspaper, an anti-war newspaper, out of San Francisco. Well, I joined, and everything that was sent to you was sent in a brown envelope that could not be scanned by the postal inspectors. And they didn't put their return address, because if they put your address where they could find it, you'd have a postal inspector at your front door and could arrest you for transmitting pornographic material.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, things have changed.
They changed, and now they want to take them right back to where they were.
Exactly.
It was like we're talking about the word queer. That was worse. That was a worse term when I was growing up than to call the N-word. And I remember that there was this kid. He was Puerto Rican and Caucasian, if there is such a thing, because his mother was Puerto Rican, but his father was, a WASP, a white Anglo-Saxon. And poor little Jerry, he wouldn't ride school buses because he got they were always abusing him, calling him names, the Q word. And I can remember we were on the bus one day, and Jerry refused to take the bus, and they would throw things at him. But he got the last laugh because he met this guy, and they opened a beauty parlor, as they call it back home. And his mother had been a designer with hair design.
Right.
And he learned the trade, and he ended up making a fortune.
Good for him.
He and his partner built this beautiful mansion-like thing. But yeah, you definitely wouldn't call it. You would not want to be called a queer. I didn't even know what it meant.
Right.
And the term gay meant you were happy.
Exactly. If you look it up in the dictionary, and it's like, okay, well, where does queer come from? That's like weird or something.
People know, just like, why are we called faggots? You and I talked about it. And it's because during the Middle Ages, when they would burn the heretics at the stake, they would wrap us with the kindling, which is faggots, and put tar and pitch on us and set us afire. And that's why gay people are called faggots. And I told that in a ministerial meeting, and it so confused and upset this Presbyterian minister that he changed his whole entire attitude and became a definite advocate for gay people.
It's amazing what history can teach us and what knowledge can help us lean into.
Yeah, but it's like I was telling you, and I've told Scott, the first time I met a drag queen, it scared me to death.
I've met a few that scared me.
I was at UNC Chapel Hill. This is during the Love Generation, and I was at Old East Dormitory, which is the oldest dormitory, State University dormitory in America. And I wasn't a student, I was just living there.
Okay.
And I would take classes for professors who would let me take it, but I didn't get any credit. And one of my best friends was on the gymnastics team. His name was Will, And Will kind of took me under his wing, because he said, "You don't know nothing." And I didn't. And the brother of the then congressman from that district had a gay bar in Chapel Hill, and it was called Pegasus. And it was along the street, and you had to go down these long stairs down from the street subterranean. And then there was this big black door, and it was like a speakeasy. You had to
Okay.
knock for
Right.
them to recognize to let you in. So we'd go in there. Bill would take me, and he'd say, "Don't mess with this guy. He's bad news. That guy's rough trade," was the phrase. And then this kid walked up named Paulette, and I thought it was Paulette till I learned his name was Paul. And I said to Bill, "What was that?" He said, "That's the drag queen." I said, "It scared me to death." I didn't know. I said, "What is that? What is drag?" I didn't know that. And I still, it's like some guy, and I won't call his name because he lives in Nashville, but he told me one day, he said, "You're just not gay."
Oh.
He said, "You are homosexual but not gay."
Okay.
And I
What does
said,
that mean?
I said, "You mean because I don't like Judy Garland, I'm not crazy about musicals, I can't do sassy high kicks, and I don't call my friend girlfriend. Is that why?" And it's like you and I were talking. I never liked the series The American Family. Isn't that what it was called?
The American Family.
Or it was the one that had a gay couple.
Yes, yes, yes.
And the reason I didn't like it because they were a stereotype.
Oh, yeah.
But a stereotype sells. It's going to get ratings. If it had been two men who acted like any two men, except they truly loved and were affectionate, it wouldn't have sold.
Right, right.
know. But there was this one guy, I remember, I said, "I hope he never goes out in a strong windstorm because he'll beat himself to death with his wrist." That's the most limp-wristed person I have ever. And in Forest City, the minister of music, I've always been fascinated by that term, at the First Baptist Church, was the most effeminate man I have ever met, and was straight as an arrow, had 11 kids.
Wow.
But he had been raised by two old spinster aunts.
Okay.
And he could, I tell you, he could prance. Oh yeah, he didn't walk, he pranced. And he could prance like a New Orleans queen, and as straight as he could be. And everybody would just say, "Well, you know how Mr. James is."
Mm-hmm. Kind of sissy.
Yeah, kind of a sissy. But if anybody had attacked him, the women's auxiliary of the garden club would have grabbed their shears and attacked them.
I'm sure so.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure so.
Absolutely. And growing up, and I did, in that little town, I remember there was a bookstore, and at the very back, it had gay magazines.
Oh.
But it wasn't magazines like today. You couldn't show any frontal nudity. It was you could show that, but no full Monties. That wasn't allowed.
Okay.
And it was this strange, weird little old man that ran it. And I didn't know it was there, but after I found out, thanks to the Baptist Church, in the Baptist bookstore, they said that Timmy and Tommy do things, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not the only person. It was like Pentecost had arrived for me.
How old were you then?
17.
Wow.
And I kept reading because I said, I got to find out what more Timmy and Tommy do. And I went in that bookstore, and you had to go all the way to the back, and they'd give you the evil eye every time you did.
Oh, yeah.
And you were supposed to check your ID, but they never did. And I found this book, and I can remember what it looked like. There was this figure in a big hat from the 1940s and an overcoat and a light shining on him, and it was called The Stories from the Street. And
Okay.
I hid it under the seat of the car, took it home, locked my door, pulled the curtains, and read it and read it and read it over and over again. And found myself having so much fun I didn't know I could have with myself. It's just so funny. I mean, what people get upset over. I told you there's no Scottish saying, if it tilts your kilt and it doesn't hurt you or anyone else, go for it.
Yeah.
And it's like with the drag queens and trans people. I don't understand that. I'd be a liar if I did say I understood it. I don't. But if I have a right to explore who I am, they have a right to explore who they are.
Exactly. I think that's the one thing is we can't imagine what it's like to be a drag queen or a trans person because that's not our experience.
No.
But that doesn't deny them the right
Exactly.
that they should have. And unfortunately, that's kind of the world we're living in right now with all of this mess. people can't explore who they want to be.
No. Well, I remember at Western Carolina, they had at that time, he was a leading black professor, and of course, I can't remember his name. And I was one of 7 white kids in this whole assembly. And he called on me after his presentation. And I said, Professor, whatever his name was, I said, I have no idea what it is, what the black experience is,
Right.
because I'm not black. I mean, I don't know what it means from the moment you take a breath that you are different. I learned what that meant a little bit when I understood what being gay was, but I could hide being gay if I chose to.
True.
You can't
True.
hide your color. And so the next day in the sociology class, Dr. Post, who's a funny chap, he had the professor there. Well, this one little redneck kid from Mississippi, he said, oh, I understand what it's to be black. I went to school with black people. I rode with them on the bus. And I thought that professor was going to have an apocalyptic fit. Like, son, you arrogant little white boy. In fact, there was a Cherokee man that I got to know, and my name in Cherokee is Yonah, which means bear. And it took me a long time for us to really commiserate because he didn't trust white people. And he was a Navy veteran, 40-year Navy veteran. And one day he said, white people can't sing. So I said, J.D., teach this dumb white boy what you're talking about. So he told the story. He said, I was on the USS Roosevelt, I think it was, and they went to shore leave, and they wanted to have a drum circle, and there were 7 Native Americans on board. So they found what they thought was a deserted beach, and they get driftwood, and they start the drum circle. And he said, all of a sudden we see this lone figure coming, and it was the admiral of the fleet, and that was his private beach, but they didn't know it. So he said, what are you sailors doing? What are you seamen doing? So he said, we're having a drum circle. You want to participate? And he said, I can't speak any of your language. It was Cherokee and Algonquin, Lakota, and Hopi, and I forgot the other one. So there's 2. He said, sing from your heart. Listen to the beat. So he started. So I said, did he ever sing, J.D.? He said, yep. By the end of it, he was singing.
Oh, that's great.
And I used to at the bars, some of the bars in Asheville, after last call, I would do a Native American song. And I would always ask the permission of the elders to sing. And one night, Tressa owned it then. And,
Okay.
And she said, Baird, sing us one of the Cherokee songs, one of the Indian songs. So I sang from whatever came forth, And we're walking out, going up the steps in Hairspray, and this guy's coming down crying. And he was Lakota Sioux. And I said, sir, are you all right? He says, the first time I've ever heard my people's music in a gay bar.
Wow.
And I started
That's
crying.
beautiful.
I started crying. But we have to have the freedom to embrace who we are, and we have to respect others for who they are. The only time we have issues is when someone forces their identity on you. It's like I told somebody one day, I refuse to conform to some ideological idea that you've established that I have to conform to be gay. Who I am as a person, being gay is only a part of it.
Yes.
Yes. It's not my totality. As an old sociology major, when you talk about community and you talk about a culture, you have to have certain mutualities, either a language, a custom, or something. And in many cases, for many of us, the only thing we have in common is a sexual attraction or a gender attraction.
True. Very true.
But beyond that, I mean, not every gay man, prances around. Not every gay man can do the knows what the fierce things are on the runway. I have never understood that. I watched that one time with John, and I laughed, and I laughed, and I laughed. I said, methinks they do protest too much. But there was these, I couldn't even begin to imitate them about, the aura, the outlook, look how you turn and swirl. And I said, there's a bunch of queens, I don't care what you call it, and what is fierce? And you can't even say, you have to say it a certain way too. Fierce, I can't do it. And the same,
We didn't pick that up, did we?
no, we didn't. Thankfully, we did not. And it's the same thing with the other end extreme with the super masculinity. And super masculinity to me is power grabs. It's domination by power, abuse. For me, to be truly masculine, it means you take the strength you have and it's strength you use to nurture, and to embrace and to protect. That
Yep.
strength. It's not the size of your bicep, and it's not the size of your penis.
Right.
You know, like I told you, there was a guy one time asked me what I thought about this one particular person, and I said, I can't stand the guy. He said, well, he's got a big dick. I said, so he's a jackass, but I don't want to go home with him.
Right.
You know, there's more to it than that. The one I was telling Scotty about, one of my most embarrassing moments, well, there's two. One time in Atlanta.
Only two?
No. One time in Atlanta, a friend of mine and I went to pick up another friend of ours at the airport. Well, I forgot I had my cock ring on.
Oh, no.
So it goes through the metal detector and it goes off. So the guy says, what if you got on this metal? And I went, oh, my Lord. And I said, it's my cock ring. He said, what? I said, my cock ring. He says, your cock ring? And that echoes all over the Atlanta airport. But the worst one was John and I, and a friend and I, were at the bowling alley. And it was a pretty cold night, and I forgot I had it on. So I start to let the ball go, and there goes my cock ring.
No.
Ding, 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 down the alley. And John's friend said, what is that? And so it's Bear's cock ring. He forgot that he had it on, and the cold's taken over, and they've been shrinking. I said, only me would lose a cock ring in a
bowling alley.
In a bowling alley. And I didn't even take out a pin. I could have at least taken out a pin or two, but I didn't get to do that. But yeah,
Oh.
I don't know. It's, I guess because I'm 78, but I remember one time we were at Scandals, and I was the designated driver, so I wasn't drinking anything. And this young guy, real polite young kid, probably in his 20s, and he said, sir, you're an older man. Can I ask you a question? I said, well, sure. He said, does it get any easier?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, in some ways it doesn't. But I said, in other ways it does. You don't worry about the things you worry so much about when you're young, when you get old, if you've learned anything.
Yeah.
And
very
you
true.
learn what's really important. And what's really important is relationship. I had told you, when AIDS began, but I was in Atlanta when it began. In fact, I knew a researcher that was involved with it. But when I came to Asheville, and Randy, I loved Randy. He was like family. I always called him my little brother. And Randy kept saying, you need to get a test. So I go to then they just established a special unit in the Buncombe County Health Department. And this sweet little nurse, bless her heart, she was so naive. She said, now, I have to ask some very, very, kind of uncomfortable questions.
Mm-hmm.
How many sexual partners have you had in your life? I said, in my life? She said, 8 or 9, 10. I said, no, 2,000, 500. She said, I have got to tell my husband. He won't believe this. I said, how do you do that? And I said, sweet darling, I said, when you're living in a city like Atlanta, you go to the bar, you pick somebody up, you could take them home, you play. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they don't. If they don't, you go back to the bar, you find somebody else. And if that hadn't satisfied you, you had the adult bookstores, so you go there. So you're doing that 7 nights a week? And I said, and besides, the only downside is who you meet at the free clinic.
Oh.
And I met some dear friends at the free clinic there.
I can only imagine.
Oh, yes. I had no idea what that was going to be. I didn't think anything could happen, but it could. Oh, I don't know. I miss some of the dear people that I had, I knew then.
Yeah.
And so, even people here in Asheville, but that's part of getting old.
That is. Let's take a break here. And when we
Okay.
come back, I want to talk a little bit about spirituality and
Okay.
religion and how that's played a role in your
That
life.
sounds good to me. I'll talk your head off.
We'll be right
on
back.
that. All right. Don't let me talk your head off.
Oh, you won't.